The woman behind the passport counter stopped typing, looked at her screen, then looked at me like she'd forgotten how to speak. "Sir," she said, "can you give me your date of birth one more time?" I gave it to her. April 9th, 1991. The same date I'd written on every form I'd ever filled out since I was old enough to hold a pen. She typed it in again, slower this time, one finger at a time, and I watched her lips move as she read whatever came back. Then she reached under her desk and pressed something. A little button I couldn't see, and she smiled at me the way you smile at a stranger when you've already decided you're afraid of them. My name is Daniel Ray Whitfield. I was 34 years old that morning, standing in a county clerk's office in Fenwick, Missouri, holding a folder with my birth certificate, my social security card, and 2 passport photos where I look like I'm being held hostage, which, looking back, is a little on the nose. I was there for the most ordinary reason in the world. My fiancée Maya and I had finally set a date. We'd booked 4 nights in a little town on the coast of Belize for a honeymoon, the first real trip either of us had ever taken, and I needed a passport to get on the plane. I'd never had one, never needed one, never had the money to leave the country, and never had a reason to want to until Maya walked into my life with her laugh and her stubbornness and her 4-year-old daughter, Lily, who calls me Dan and hides my work boots so I'll chase her. That's the whole reason I was standing at that counter. A honeymoon, a stamp in a book. "Is there a problem?" I asked. "I'm going to have my supervisor take a look," the woman said. Her name tag said Renata. "It's probably just a glitch in the system. Happens all the time." It doesn't happen all the time. I've stood in enough government lines in my life to know when someone is lying to keep you calm. A man came out from a back office. Older, grey at the temples, reading glasses pushed up on his forehead. He leaned over Renata's shoulder and read the screen, and I watched his whole face change. Not confusion. Something worse than confusion. He read it twice, then he took the glasses off his forehead and put them on and read it a 3rd time, like the words might rearrange themselves into something he could handle. "Mr. Whitfield," he said, "I'm going to ask you to have a seat over there for a few minutes. We need to verify some information before we can process your application." "Verify what?" I said. "It's my birth certificate. It's a state document. I've had it my whole life." "I understand, sir." He was already reaching for the phone. "Please, just a few minutes." I sat down in a plastic chair against the wall, under a bulletin board covered in flyers about jury duty and voter registration, and I did what any person does in that situation. I told myself it was nothing. A typo in a database. A number transposed somewhere back in 1991 by a clerk who was tired and underpaid. It would get sorted out, and I'd be back at the job site by noon and Maya would laugh about it over dinner. But my hands wouldn't stop moving. I've got working hands, an electrician's hands, scars across the knuckles, and a burn on my left thumb that never fully healed. I sat there rubbing that burn with my other thumb, back and forth, watching the supervisor talk on the phone, with his back to me and his shoulders up around his ears. And behind all of it, like he always was in moments like this, stood the ghost of Frank Sutter, my stepfather. The man who packed my bags for me on my 18th birthday and set them on the porch before I was even awake. Frank married my mother Diane when I was 7. 2 years before that, it had just been the 2 of us. Or that's the story I grew up with. Diane and her boy, moving from town to town, never staying anywhere long enough for me to keep a friend. She waited tables, cleaned motel rooms, did whatever there was to do. And then Frank came along, a foreman at a grain elevator with a steady paycheck, and a house with a fenced yard. And to a woman who'd spent years running from something she never named, he must have looked like solid ground. He never looked at me that way, though. From the first week in that house, Frank Sutter treated me like a debt he'd agreed to pay without reading the fine print. He had a daughter of his own from before, a girl named Rachel, a year younger than me. Rachel got the good bedroom, the one with the window over the garden. I got the one off the laundry room that smelled like dryer sheets and mildew. Rachel got a bike for her birthday, a real one from the store with a bow on it. When my birthday came around, Frank would look at me across the table and say, "You got a roof, don't you? You got food. Some kids don't got that." He never hit me. I'll give him that much, though it's not much. He hurt me in quieter ways. He hurt me with arithmetic. Every meal I ate, he counted. Every pair of shoes, every winter coat, He made sure I understood was charity, and that charity has a limit, and that I was getting close to it. "You're not mine," he told me once. I was maybe 12. I'd asked if I could go out for the school baseball team, and it cost $40 for the uniform. Blood takes care of blood. You're not my blood. Don't forget whose money you're spending. I didn't forget. He made sure I never did. My mother would go quiet when he talked like that. She'd get up and start washing a dish that was already clean, run the water so she didn't have to hear it. I used to hate her for that silence. I used to think she was weak, that she loved Frank more than she loved me, that she'd sold me out for a fenced yard and a steady paycheck. I understand it differently now, but I'm getting ahead of myself. The one person in that house who ever treated me like a person was Rachel. She'd sneak me half her allowance. She'd wait up for me when I came home late from a job, so I wouldn't have to walk into a dark, unwelcoming house alone. Once, when I was 15 and Frank had gone off about the electric bill and said maybe I should find somewhere else to sleep if I was going to leave lights on, Rachel came into my room after everyone was asleep and sat on the end of my bed and said, "He's wrong, Danny. You belong here as much as I do. More even. You're kinder than any of us." I've thought about that sentence 1,000 times since. You're kinder than any of us. A 15-year-old girl saw something the adults refused to. The morning I turned 18, I woke up to Frank standing in my doorway with his arms crossed. My 2 duffel bags were already packed and sitting on the front porch. He'd done it while I slept, gone through my drawers and my closet and folded my whole life into 2 bags. "You're a man today," he said. "A man makes his own way. This was always the deal. You're not my responsibility anymore, and if we're being straight with each other, you never really were." I looked past him to the kitchen, where my mother stood with a coffee cup she wasn't drinking from, her knuckles white around it. She wouldn't look at me. She looked at the floor, at the window, at anything that wasn't her son being put out of the house. On the morning he became an adult. "Mum," I said. Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. She turned around and walked into the pantry and shut the door, and that was the last real memory I have of the woman who raised me. The back of her, disappearing behind a pantry door so she wouldn't have to say goodbye. Rachel chased my truck down the driveway in her socks. She was 17. She was crying so hard she could barely get the words out. "This isn't right," she kept saying. "This isn't right, Danny, I'm so sorry." "It's not on you, Rach," I told her through the window. "None of this was ever on you." And then I drove away, and I built a life with my own 2 hands, and I promised myself I would never again stand in a doorway, waiting for someone to tell me I didn't belong. 16 years I kept that promise. I apprenticed as an electrician, got my journeyman's license, worked every hour anybody would give me. I rented a room, then an apartment. Then, 3 years ago, I put money down on a little 2-bedroom house on Sumner Street with a maple tree in the front yard. I met Maya at a hardware store, of all places, when she couldn't figure out which fuse she needed, and I offered to help and ended up helping for the next 3 years. Her daughter took to me before Maya did. Lily decided I was hers, and I decided the same right back. If you'd asked me that morning what family meant, I'd have told you it was something you build, not something you're born into. I believed that all the way down to my boots. I had no idea how right and how wrong I was about to find out I'd been. The supervisor hung up the phone. He didn't come over right away. He stood there a second, gathering himself, and then he walked over and pulled a chair around so he was sitting across from me instead of standing over me. Which I noticed because it's what you do when you're about to give someone bad news, and you don't want to be looking down at them when you do it. "Mr. Whitfield, my name is Gerald Pruitt. I manage this office." He folded his hands. "I want to be honest with you because I don't think you've done anything wrong, and I don't want you to feel like you're in trouble. But something has come up that I'm not able to just process past." "Okay," I said. My mouth had gone dry. When we submit a passport application, the birth record gets checked against a couple of federal databases. It's automatic. It's mostly to catch fraud, people using the identity of someone who's passed away, that kind of thing. He took a breath. "The birth certificate you gave us and the social security number attached to it. They're flagged." "Flagged how?" "They belong to a child who was reported deceased. In 1990. I actually laughed. It came out before I could stop it. This short, ugly bark of a laugh, because it was so absurd. "I was born in 1991. I'm sitting right here. Whatever child died in 1990, that's got nothing to do with me. It's a mix-up. 2 people with the same name." Gerald Pruitt didn't laugh with me. He looked at me with a terrible kind of gentleness. The certificate says you were born April 9th, 1991, he said quietly. But the record it's built on belongs to a boy who was born in 1988 and died in the spring of 1990. Same name, same document number. Somebody took a real child's records and put a living child's information on top of them. That's not a clerical error, Mr. Whitfield. That's something else. The bulletin board on the wall behind him had a flyer for a lost dog. I remember staring at the dog while he talked. A golden retriever named Biscuit. Last seen near Route 6. There's a reward. There's more, Pruitt said. And I debated whether to tell you here in a waiting room, but I think you'd rather know than be handled. When your information hit the system this morning, it didn't just flag as deceased. It matched an open case. A federal one. There's a note attached to the file with a phone number and instructions to call it immediately if anyone ever tried to use these documents. What case? My voice didn't sound like mine. I don't have access to the details, but I called the number. He glanced toward the door. Mr. Whitfield, an agent is on her way here now. She was already in the state. She said, and I'm quoting her because it stuck with me, she said she's been waiting 32 years for someone to make this phone call. My phone buzzed in my jacket pocket. I almost didn't look at it, but it buzzed again, insistent, and I pulled it out. Unknown number. The message read, Daniel Krieg, please stay where you are. My name is Special Agent Teresa Nolan, FBI. I'm 20 minutes out. You are not in any trouble. There are people who have been looking for you for a very long time, and they need you to be safe. Please don't leave. I read it 3 times, then I read it a 4th. There are people who have been looking for you for a very long time. I thought about my mother behind the pantry door. I thought about all the moving when I was small, town after town, motel after motel. A woman who never told me why we could never stay. I thought about the fact that there were no baby pictures of me. Not one. When I was a kid and asked, Diane always said they got lost in a move. All of them. The whole box. And she'd get a look on her face that ended the conversation. I thought I was born in a hospital, in a town called Renner, that I'd never been able to find on a map. I told myself the town got absorbed into a bigger one, that towns do that. 34 years of small, strange things I'd smoothed over. And they all came loose at once, sitting in that plastic chair under a flyer for a lost dog. Mr. Pruitt, I said. My voice was shaking now and I didn't care. Who died in 1990? He looked at his notes, then at me, and he decided to tell me the truth. And I'll be grateful to that man for the rest of my life for not treating me like I couldn't handle it. The records were tampered with, he said. But underneath the false layer, the original birth record belongs to a boy named Daniel Ray Whitfield, who died at 22 months old. The mother listed on the original certificate is a woman named Diane Whitfield. Diane. My mother. He was her son, I said slowly, feeling my way through it like a dark room. The real Daniel. He was her real son. And he died. That's what it looks like, yes. And she gave his name to me. Pruitt didn't answer because he didn't have to, and because there wasn't an answer that would make it hurt less. I had spent my entire life being told I wasn't Frank's blood. Standing at the edge of that room, I understood I might not be anyone's blood at all. That the name I'd fought so hard to make something of, the name on my truck registration and my journeyman's license and the deed to the house on Sumner Street, belonged to a baby who'd been dead for 35 years. I was living in a dead child's name. And somewhere out there, if that text message was true, there were people who'd spent 3 decades looking for the living one. Agent Teresa Nolan arrived in 19 minutes. I know because I watched the clock. She was younger than I expected, maybe 40. Dark hair pulled back, a way of moving through a room that made everyone else go still. Pruitt led her to a small conference room in the back, the kind with a fake wood table and a box of tissues that told you what kind of conversations happened there, and she asked me to sit, and she sat across from me and set a folder on the table, but didn't open it right away. Daniel, she said. Can I call you Daniel? I know that name might mean something complicated to you now, but it's the name you've answered to your whole life, and I'm not going to take that from you until you're ready. That's fine, I said. I need you to understand something before we go any further. You are the victim here. Whatever you learn today, none of it is your fault, and none of it is your shame to carry. Do you understand me? I nodded. I didn't understand. Not really. But I nodded. She opened the folder. The first thing she slid across the table was a photograph. A young woman, maybe 25, sitting on a porch step with a baby on her lap. The woman had a wide face and light brown hair, and she was mid-laugh, her head tipped back, the baby's fat little fist grabbing at her collar. "This is a woman named Catherine Brennan," Nolan said. "Kate, and the baby is her son. He was born April 9th, 1991, in Aldridge, Ohio. His name was Owen. April 9th, 1991. My birthday. The date that was fake on the dead boy's certificate. The date that was real on this one. On September 2nd, 1991, Nolan went on, and her voice was steady but careful. Kate Brennan took her 2 children to a farmer's market in Aldridge. Owen was 5 months old in a stroller. His sister Hannah was 4. Kate stopped at a produce stand to pay for a bag of peaches. It was crowded, a festival weekend. She had Hannah by one hand and the stroller handle in the other, and for a moment, less than a minute, a woman beside her started talking to her, asking about a recipe, being friendly. And when Kate turned back, the stroller was empty. I couldn't breathe right. I put my hand flat on the table, like I needed to hold it down. They searched for months. Years. There were sightings all over 3 states. All of them dead ends. The case went cold, but it never closed, and Kate Brennan never stopped. Nolan tapped the folder. "This is one of the most persistent missing child cases this office has ever worked. And this morning, for the first time in 32 years, the boy in that stroller walked into a passport office in Missouri and tried to book a honeymoon." "You think I'm him?" I said. "You think I'm Owen?" "I don't think. Not yet. That's not how we do this, but I'll tell you what I know." She pulled out another photo. This one was newer. A woman in her late 50s, silver in her hair now, standing at some kind of podium with a candle in her hand. "This is Kate today. She's a school nurse in Aldridge. Every September 2nd for 32 years, she has organised a candlelight vigil in the town square for missing children. Not just for Owen. For all of them. She turned the worst day of her life into a lighthouse for other families. She has helped find 9 other children over the years. She just never found her own." I looked at the woman with the candle, and I don't know how to explain what happened next except that I recognised her. Not from anywhere. I'd never seen her before in my life. But something behind my ribs went off like an alarm, some part of me older than memory, and my eyes filled up before my brain caught up. "There's a birthmark," Nolan said gently. "In the case file. Owen Brennan had a birthmark behind his left ear, shaped like a crescent moon. Kate described it to investigators 100 times over the years, in case someone somewhere saw a boy with a mark like that." My hand was already moving. My whole life I've had a mark behind my left ear, a pale crescent, and I never thought about it because you don't think about the parts of yourself you've always had. Barbers had commented on it. Maya had kissed it. I reached up and touched it now. And Agent Nolan watched my hand go there before I said a single word, and I saw her jaw tighten, and I saw her, a federal agent who does this for a living, blink back tears. "We'll confirm with DNA," she said, her voice not quite level. "We always confirm. But Daniel, I have looked at 10,000 faces in this job, and you have your mother's eyes. They swabbed my cheek in that little conference room. Nolan said the rush results would take a couple of days, but she already had photos, records, a case file 3 inches thick, and a woman in Ohio who'd been waiting since 1991. And she asked me if she could tell Kate Brennan that they'd found someone, that they had a strong lead. I said yes. Then I asked the question I'd been holding down since the moment Gerald Pruitt said the name Diane Whitfield. "What about my mother?" I said. "The woman who raised me, what happens to her?" Nolan folded her hands. "We located Diane Whitfield this morning. She's alive. She's 61, lives in a town called Culver, about 40 miles from here. Agents are with her now." "Is she under arrest?" She's being questioned. Daniel, I'm not going to soften this. If the DNA confirms what we both already know it's going to confirm, she will be arrested for kidnapping. There's no statute of limitations that saves her from this. She took a child that wasn't hers and raised him under a dead boy's name for 32 years, and she moved you across state lines a dozen times to keep from being caught. That's exactly what all that moving was. I thought about the motels, the new schools, the way she'd pack us up in the middle of the night sometimes, throw everything in the car and drive until sunup. And I'd asked her once, I couldn't have been more than 6, why we always had to leave. And she'd said, "Because staying is dangerous, baby. Staying is how they find you." I thought she meant a bad man, a boyfriend, something from her past. She meant the police, She meant the Brennans, she meant the whole machinery of a country looking for a stolen baby. She was running from all of it, with me strapped in the back seat, calling her Mom. Why did she do it? I asked. It came out cracked. Why me? Why any of it? Nolan slid one more piece of paper across the table. It was a death certificate. Daniel Ray Whitfield, 22 months. Cause of death, complications of a congenital heart defect. Date, March 1990. She lost her son, Nolan said. Her real Daniel. Heart condition he was born with. From what we're piecing together, she came apart after he died. Her marriage ended. She spun out. And a year and a half later, at a farmer's market in a town she was passing through, she saw a baby in a stroller who was about the age her Daniel would have been, and she made a decision that ruined at least 2 families, and probably more. I looked at that death certificate for a long time. A little boy I'd never met, whose name I'd carried like a coat all my life. Somewhere out there was a grave with my name on it. My whole legal name. A headstone that said Daniel Ray Whitfield. And it wasn't mine. And it also somehow was. I didn't know what I felt. That's the honest truth. I've heard people describe moments like this and they always make it clean. This pure rush of rage or joy or grief. It wasn't clean. It was everything at once and none of it fit together. I was furious at Diane. I ached for Diane. I wanted to find Kate Brennan and I wanted to run out of that building and never learn another thing. I was 34 years old and I had loved a woman my whole life as my mother, and she was a kidnapper. And she was also the only mother I'd ever known, and both of those things were sitting in the same chest at the same time. And Frank, I said. The name came out flat. My stepfather, did he know? Did he? Nolan hesitated, and in that hesitation I already had my answer. We'll know more after we speak with him. But Daniel. She looked at me steadily. When agents told Diane this morning that we knew, one of the first things she said, before her lawyer stopped her, was that Frank found out years ago, that he'd known since you were a teenager. The room went very quiet. He knew. Frank Sutter, who told me I wasn't his blood, who counted my meals and packed my bags and put me out of the house on the morning I turned 18. He hadn't hated me because I was some other man's son. He'd hated me because I was a walking felony, living under his roof. Because every day I sat at his table, I was evidence. He'd looked at me across that kitchen for years and seen not a boy but a liability, a thing that could send his wife to prison and his family into the newspapers. And he'd counted the days until he could legally shove me out the door and wash his hands of the whole thing. You're not my blood. He'd said it like a curse. It turned out to be the truest and cruelest thing anyone ever told me, and he knew exactly how true it was, and he never once told me why. I'd spent 16 years thinking Frank threw me away because I wasn't good enough, because I wasn't wanted, because there was something wrong with me that made a man look at a child and decide not to love him. There was never anything wrong with me. There was something wrong with the story I'd been dropped into as an infant, and Frank had chosen to protect the story instead of the boy. I called Maya from the parking lot. I sat in my truck and I couldn't get the key in the ignition, and I called her, and when she picked up I couldn't talk. I just made a sound, and she said, Danny, what happened? Are you hurt? And I managed to tell her enough that she left work in the middle of her shift and drove to that clerk's office and found me still sitting in the parking lot, and she climbed into the passenger seat and held on to me while I fell apart in a way I hadn't since I was a kid. I want to say something about Maya here, because in a story full of people who lied to me and used me and threw me away, she is the one who reminds me that not everybody does. She didn't ask me a single practical question that afternoon. Not about lawyers, not about DNA, not about what any of it meant for us. She just held on and let me shake, and said the same thing over and over into my hair. You're real. Whatever your name is, you're real. And you're mine and Lily's, and you're not going anywhere. That night we told Lily, a small, careful, 4-year-old version of it, that Dan found out he had another family from a long time ago, a mommy and a daddy and a sister, and that it was a good thing, even though it made him cry. Lily thought about this with the enormous seriousness of a preschooler, and then she said, So now you have 2 families? And I said, yes, I supposed I did. And she said, That's okay. I have you and mommy and grandma and my fish. That's 4 families, you can have 2. 4-year-olds understand things adults spend a fortune in therapy to relearn. The DNA came back in 3 days. It was a match, a definitive one. I was Owen Brennan, born April 9th, 1991, in Aldridge, Ohio, taken from a farmer's market at 5 months old and gone for 32 years. Agent Nolan called to tell me herself, and then she asked if I was ready to meet them. They flew in the next weekend, Kate and Thomas Brennan, and their daughter Hannah. I've been trying to figure out how to describe what it's like to walk into a room and meet your mother for the first time as a grown man. I don't think I can do it justice. Nolan set it up at a family services building with soft chairs and a coffee machine, someplace neutral and private. And she walked me down a hallway and stopped outside a door and said, "Take all the time you need. They've waited 32 years. They can wait another 5 minutes if you're not ready." But I was ready. I don't know how I knew, but I was. I opened the door. Kate Brennan was standing in the middle of the room. She was smaller than I'd imagined, the silver in her hair catching the window light, and she had her hand pressed over her mouth. And when she saw me, she made a sound I have never heard a person make before or since. It came from somewhere below grief, below joy, some deeper place that only opens once in a life. "Owen," she said. Not a question. She'd know me anywhere. Oh, my Owen. She crossed the room and she reached up because I'm a head taller than her. And she took my face in both her hands, and she turned my head gently to the side, and she looked behind my left ear at the little crescent moon she'd described to strangers 10,000 times. And then she just held my face and wept. And I put my arms around this small silver-haired stranger, who was my mother, and 32 years of a lie fell off me like a weight I'd carried so long I'd forgotten it wasn't part of my body. Thomas Brennan, my father, a broad, quiet man with a carpenter's hands not so different from mine, stood back at first. He came forward slow. He put one hand on my shoulder and then the other, and he said, "We never stopped. I need you to know that. Not one single day. There were people who told your mother to accept he's gone, and she never once believed it. And she was right. She was right the whole time." And then this big, quiet man put his forehead against my shoulder and shook, and I held both of my parents at once. And I understood, finally, all the way down, what Frank Sutter had never been able to take from me, even though he tried for 11 years. That somewhere in the world, I had always been wanted. That the wanting never stopped. Not for a day, not for 32 years. Even while I stood in doorways believing I was nobody's boy. And then Hannah. My sister was 36 now. She'd been 4 years old the day I was taken, old enough to remember, and she'd carried it her whole life. She told me later that she blamed herself for decades, that she was holding our mother's other hand that day, and she'd been fussing about wanting a candy apple, and she'd always believed that if she hadn't been fussing, our mother would have kept a better grip on the stroller. A 4-year-old carrying that. For 32 years. She didn't hug me at first. She just stood there and looked at me like she was checking my face against a photograph she'd kept somewhere private for 3 decades. And then she said, in this wobbling voice, "I used to talk to you. When I was little. After you were gone, I'd talk to your empty crib. I told you all my secrets because I figured wherever you were, my brother should still know things about me." She laughed, and it broke in the middle. "You missed a lot. I've got a lot to catch you up on." "I've got nowhere to be," I told her. "I've got the rest of my life." The next few months were the strangest and best of my life, all tangled together. Diane was arrested and charged. I went to see her once before the trial. I don't fully know why. Maya said I didn't owe her anything, and she was right, I didn't. But 32 years is 32 years, and there were things I needed to say and things I needed to ask, and I couldn't walk into the rest of my life dragging that silence behind me. She looked small across the table in the visiting room. Old in a way she hadn't been the last time I saw her. She cried before I even sat down. "I know there's nothing I can say," she started. "There isn't," I told her. "But you're going to answer me anyway. Did you ever love me? Or was I just a bandage you slapped over a hole?" She flinched like I'd hit her, and then she looked at me, really looked at me, and she said, "Both. God help me, both. I took you because I was out of my mind with grief, and you were the right age and you had a little face, and I wasn't thinking. I wasn't a person, I was just this open wound walking around. That's the truth of how it started. But I raised you for 32 years, Danny. I sat up with you when you had the chicken pox. I watched you learn to ride a bike. I was the proudest person in that gymnasium when you got your license." She was sobbing now. It started as the worst thing a person can do, but somewhere in there it turned into love, Real love. And I know I don't have the right to it, and I know I stole your whole life and I stole those people's son, and I will die knowing it. But you asked, and the answer is both. It was always both. I didn't forgive her that day. I'm not sure I ever fully will. Some things aren't yours to forgive on anyone else's behalf, and she took me from Kate and Thomas Brennan, and that's theirs to reckon with, not mine to erase. But I heard her, and I told her the one thing I'd come to say. The little boy, I said. The real Daniel. Your Daniel. I carried his name for 34 years, and I didn't know he was ever real. I'm sorry he died. I'm sorry you lost him. That was a real loss, and it was terrible. And none of what you did, after changes that a good little boy died and his mother's heart broke. I stood up. That's the only mercy I've got in me. I hope it's worth something. She was still crying when the guard led me out. That was the last time I saw her. She took a plea. She's serving her sentence now, and I don't visit. And I've made my peace with the version of peace that's actually available in a situation like this, which is not clean and never will be. Frank Sutter was charged too, for concealment. He'd known since I was 16. Diane told him during a bad night, the way she told him a lot of things. And instead of going to the police, instead of doing the one right thing that would have given Kate Brennan her son back 15 years sooner, Frank did the math the way he always did. He weighed a stranger's grief against his own comfort, and comfort won. He kept the secret, and he resented me for being the secret, and he counted the days until he could put me out. He got probation and a suspended sentence, being cooperative and elderly, and useful to the prosecution. It's less than I wanted for him. But I've decided Frank Sutter is going to spend the rest of his life being exactly who he already is, and there is no worse sentence available than that. Rachel found me my stepsister, who'd chased my truck down the driveway in her socks. She saw the story in the news, called every Whitfield in 3 states until she found a number for me, and when I picked up, she couldn't talk for crying. I always knew something was wrong in that house, she said. I always knew Dad's hatred didn't add up. It was too big for the reasons he gave. I'm so sorry, Danny. I'm so sorry I couldn't do anything. I was just a kid. I told her the same thing I told her the day I left. It was never on her. She's the one good thing that came out of 11 years in that house. And I wasn't about to let Frank cost me her too. She's meeting Lily next month. Rachel's going to be Aunt Rachel. Some families you're born into, some you keep on purpose. I go by Owen now. It took some getting used to. For a while I answered to both, and the guys on the job site had a field day with it, calling me Owen Dan and two-name and worse. But it's Owen now. It's the name my mother whispered over a stroller 32 years ago. It's the name she said every September at a vigil in a town square, hoping it would carry far enough to reach me. It reached me. I'm going to wear it right. Maya and I got married last spring. We did it in Aldridge, in Kate and Thomas's backyard. Under a tree my father built a bench around 40 years ago. Both my families were there. Kate and Thomas and Hannah's kids. My niece and nephew, who call me Uncle Owen, like they've been doing it their whole lives. Rachel came. Maya's mother came. Lily was the flower girl and took the job, with a gravity that made grown adults cry walking down that grass path, scattering petals one careful pinch at a time. We never did make it to Belize, by the way. Life happened. We'll get there, and this time when I apply for that passport, the name on it is going to be the one I was born with, and there won't be a flag on it, and no supervisor is going to come out of a back office with his glasses pushed up on his forehead. It's just going to be a stamp in a book, the most ordinary thing in the world. I've earned ordinary. Kate still runs her vigil every September 2nd. This year, for the first time in 32 years, she stood up in that town square and told the crowd that one of the candles had come home. She asked me to say a few words. I'm not a public speaker. I fix wiring for a living. But I stood up in front of a few hundred strangers holding candles, and I told them the thing I most needed people to know. I told them that for 34 years, I believed I was nobody's blood, that a man had looked me in the eye and told me I didn't belong, and I'd built my whole understanding of myself around that wound, and that it turned out the man was lying, or half lying, keeping the worst kind of secret, and that all along, across a couple of state lines, there had been a woman lighting a candle for me every single year, refusing to believe I was gone, when everyone with any sense told her to give up. I told them that if you love someone who's missing, don't you dare give up. And if you ever see something that doesn't sit right, a story that doesn't add up, a child who seems to belong to a family that treats them like a stranger, say something. Anything. Because somewhere out there, a person might be one phone call away from coming home, and you could be the phone call. I keep something on my desk now. Not the passport photos, not the death certificate, though I have that too, put away somewhere safe, because that little boy deserves to be remembered by someone even if it can't be the way anyone would have wanted. What I keep on my desk is the little slip of paper Gerald Pruitt handed me that morning, the one that said my application couldn't be processed, referred for additional verification. The worst piece of paper I ever received, the one that told me my whole life was built on a grave. I keep it framed. Because that slip of paper is the thing that finally set me free. It didn't take my identity away from me. It gave me the real one back. It took a broken record in a database, and a clerk who followed the rules, and a mother who never stopped lighting candles, and it brought a stolen baby home 32 years late. Frank Sutter told me I wasn't his blood, and he meant it to break me. He had no idea he was handing me the truth. I wasn't his blood. I was never supposed to be in that house at all. I belonged to Kate and Thomas Brennan, and to Hannah, who talked to my empty crib. And I belonged to a maple tree in a backyard in Ohio, and to a candle lit every September. And now I belong to Maya and Lily, too, and to a stepsister who chased a truck down a driveway in her socks and never stopped believing I was good. I spent 32 years as a missing child, and I didn't even know I was missing. That's the part nobody tells you. You can be lost your whole life and think you're just where you're supposed to be. And then one ordinary morning, in an ordinary line, over an ordinary stamp in a book, the truth comes looking for you. I'm not missing anymore. My name is Owen Brennan, and I finally know exactly whose blood I am. If this story moved you, take a second to let me know in the comments. And if you believe every missing child deserves someone who never stops looking, subscribe and stay with us. There are more stories like this one, and someone out there always needs to hear that coming home is still possible.